Your worth is not proportional to your sacrifice. You working while your kids are at home that doesn't define success. A lot of leaders carry this unconscious thing in their head that says the more exhausted I am, the more valuable I must be. And eventually that becomes really destructive because they stop measuring impact and they start measuring their suffering.
If you've been listening a while, you know we don't have guests here on Crafted Clarity very often, and that's intentional. When someone joins me here, it's usually because there's something underneath their story worth paying attention to. Today, I'm joined by Jordan Solender. Jordan is a founder, operator, investor, and CEO coach who's built and scaled multiple businesses across completely different industries. But what caught my attention wasn't the businesses. It was something he said in our first conversation. That founders don't stay stuck in the weeds because they're needed. They stay there because that's where they feel valuable. And once he said that, I knew this conversation was going deeper. Because this episode really isn't about scaling businesses. It's about what happens when usefulness quietly becomes identity, and what leaders are forced to confront when the business no longer needs the same version of them they once did. So pour yourself something good and let's get into it. For people listening who may not know you yet, give us a little context for the world you live in every day and the kind of leaders you spend your time around.
Oof. Well, first off, thanks for having me, Steve. Very excited about this. I do not have a drink because I don't drink, but I have a glass of sparkling water here, so I'll be drinking
No
that
judgment here, man.
and getting my clarity. So, yeah, my world every day is mostly founders and operators that have built something meaningful, right? The business isn't broken. They're successful businesses, right? And I'm sure your listeners own probably successful businesses, but something inside their business they know they've outgrown. They've accidentally made themselves the center of gravity for this entire company. And on paper, like I said, things look successful. Typically, revenue's growing, the team's growing, opportunities are growing. They have inbound business. They got a great reputation. But internally, they're exhausted, man, because everything is routing through them. Every decision, every fire, every relationship, every escalation. And I relate to that super deeply. As a guy with 3 kids under the age of 6, I lived that way for years when, right up until about like my firstborn was like 1 or 2. And I built businesses where I was the rainmaker, the problem solver, the closer, the visionary all at once. And eventually you realize the business didn't grow around your strengths. It grew around your inability to let go. You somehow think that you get your value from being in the center of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And you find comfort in that, even though you don't want to admit it. And when founders come to me, I point that out. So a lot of the conversations I have now with founders are less about like tactics and more about identity. Who are you if you're no longer the hero? Who are you if the business can function without your constant involvement? Because intellectually, right? Like you're a smart dude. I've listened to a lot of your episodes. I think I connect and resonate with a lot of your audience. Every founder says they want freedom, right? But emotionally, a lot of us built our self-worth around being needed and the one that the chaos has to gravitate around.
Yeah. So when they come to you and they say, we want freedom, what do they specifically think freedom means when they first come to you?
Well, typically when they're booking a call with me or they've heard of me, they're thinking that freedom means more space, more flexibility, right? But what they really mean is they want relief without irrelevance. And I think that's an interesting concept, right? Because they want the business to stop consuming them, but they also want to feel essential to it, right? Like, this is my thing, right? Like, this is what I'm known for. And that's the tension, that push and pull of it all, because the real freedom usually requires becoming less central to the business. And a lot of founders say they want a business that runs without them until they actually start building one. And then they start to feel a little disconnected and they start to feel a little replaceable, sometimes even invisible, because for years, their importance was reinforced by urgency and people saying, "Hey, boss, I got this problem. Only you can solve it," right? Or you're the only one that knows the answer to this pricing situation. So without that, just like in a relationship with a significant other, right? When you don't feel as needed, right? Then you kind of feel invisible. And it's very similar. Entrepreneurs typically say like owning a business or having a partner is a marriage in itself. It very much is, you know.
Yeah, and it's ironic, and you've shown the irony here is that as a leader and as an owner, you built this thing and it's become your identity. I mean, it's synonymous with who you are. And so when you let other people in, um, then you get that sense of, well, I'm losing part of my identity. And then that tension we talked about just grows a little bit more. So you have that pull of, well, I need to let go. I want to let go. I want that freedom. But having that freedom is uncomfortable.
So uncomfortable for people. And what I notice a lot of the time, Steve, is they can't put their finger on why, and I almost have to point it out to them and I have to like hold a mirror up to them and say, most founders don't realize they built two things at the same time. I actually say this to them all the time. I say that you don't realize you built two things. They built a company and then they built an identity about being the one carrying it all. And now, if you end up wanting to exit that company or scale that company, well, you can't have founder dependency. You can't have both things. You can't have this identity of being the one carrying it all and at the same time have a company that scales. And truthfully, there's so many studies on this you should look up. It's so interesting to see companies that really just kind of plateau between the 1 and the 7 million mark. A lot of entrepreneurs call that Death Valley, or CEO coaches call that Death Valley, because it's where emotion gets in the way of hitting that ceiling of what it takes to scale. And what it takes to scale, usually getting to 1 million, it won't work getting to say 10 million. It's what got you here won't get you there. I'm sure you've heard people say that. And my favorite analogy to use, if you've heard this one, is the horse and buggy analogy. You ever heard this one about scale?
Not sure.
So you're on a horse and buggy. You want to get that horse to go faster. What do?
Yeah, you
You whip
hit
that
the
horse.
horse.
You whip that horse, right? That's what you do. You kick the horse. I don't know. I'm not a horse rider, but you whip the horse. So you whip the horse. You do that twice as much. You go twice as fast, right? But if I told you wanted to go 10 times as fast, what do? You you get rid of the horse. You got to get a car, right? Because what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thinking that I'm attached to that horse. I'm attached to the way I do things in my company. I'm just going to do twice as much. And now you're burning yourself out. You're stressed. You got chaos because what got you to 1 million, was going one times, normal whipping. And
Yeah.
then what got you to 3 million is you whip 3 times as much. But getting to 10 or 50 or 100 million, it's won't get you there. It's not the same thing. So most of my conversations are around getting out of your head with that.
And how do those conversations land with the leader who came to you for maybe business advice, but now you're talking to them about freedom and scaling back and identity? I mean, how does that land with them?
Typically, it takes them a moment to understand the frame I'm coming at, right? Usually it's met with a little resistance because they always think the problem is tactical, right? They typically walk into a conversation with me saying, I need a better CRM. Or if I just hire this one guy, or if I have that one sales guy, right? Better time management, maybe. And sometimes, yeah, those things matter. They're variables in this a greater equation of your mindset. But eventually, you can feel when the real issue is underneath the operations. And usually it lands when they realize they built a business that can grow, but their nervous system can't tolerate letting control. And I pointed out to them like really easy. I dig deep pretty fast in our calls when I call them clarity calls. When we have a clarity call, and I go a simple question right out of the gate after they tell me a little bit of the snapshot of the business, I say, what's something that only you can do today? And it's usually something that could be delegated very easily, right? But they feel very certain if they do it. And as soon as I say, what if we hired somebody in the next 30 days to do that? They typically say, that would be great, but they'll probably get it wrong. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so now we got an ego to deal with, So I can very quickly tell, is this an identity issue? Is this really a tactical issue? Do you actually need that tool or that hire? Right? Like what level of
Yeah.
emotion is playing in here?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I've seen that too. That, well, we've solved this. Now, can you move forward? Well, there's something else. So let's go back a little bit. You weren't always an executive coach or a leadership coach. How did you get here from where you were?
Interesting story. So I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I'm a third generation entrepreneur. But I got here becoming the exact person I now work with. I started as an operator entrepreneur. I built different companies, very different industries, everything from a wedding DJ company to snow shoveling in high school and college, snow shoveling business, you know, and externally within these companies, whether it was a wedding DJ company or an IT reseller that I had and sold, um, externally everything looked good, right? Growth, revenue, momentum. But internally, I was becoming this bottleneck in almost every business that I touched. And I know bottleneck is the new word, right? But it perfectly describes everything. So that choke point. And and for a long time, I wore that like a badge of honor almost. I thought being involved in everything meant I cared more, maybe, or that I was a better entrepreneur or I could outwork the next guy if I was involved in everything. I thought exhaustion almost was proof of the commitment I had to my own business, like coming home tired, going, "Oh, I had such a rough day." Right? Like that was like a thing to be proud of. But eventually I started realizing that the businesses weren't scaling around systems, they were scaling around my availability. So when my availability lacked, right, we started to fail.
Hmm.
And that ultimately creates a very fragile company if you're trying to build anything. And I realized, going back to that ceiling again, that's typically the ceiling, and I hit it very quickly in all of my businesses. So at the same time I'm realizing all this, I was becoming a husband and a father of 3 kids, and COVID was happening.
Oh, wow.
So trying to build all of these things while realizing that if I disappeared mentally or emotionally into work all the time or just gave up because of COVID, right? Eventually there wouldn't be much left of me outside of being useful, right? So the coaching side actually happened pretty naturally. Founders, once I kind of figured out these problems on scaling with systems and putting process in place and how to hire people correctly, and that's our own, proprietary methodology that we use when it comes to hiring people and putting systems and SOPs in place. People around me started noticing that. So I joined EO and started associating myself with a lot of EO people. I'm on their board now in both a regional way as well as globally. And then I hang out also and associate myself with a lot of YPO people. And a lot of them kept coming up to me saying, "Hey, could you help me with this? What are your thoughts on that? How did you build this?" And I thought to myself, like, I'm kind of getting these questions a lot. I should really put a platform around this. Again, I'm systems oriented now more than I've ever been in my life. My wife, it drives my wife nuts when it comes to when I accidentally do it with the kids. But like, if you want to ride a bike, this is the system. um, but the deeper conversations, around how I do this or that in my company kept surfacing very naturally because I wasn't speaking theoretically anymore. I was speaking from the middle of my own unraveling psychologically
Hmm.
and the company unraveling and then rebuilding it all. And people can feel the difference between advice from somebody who studied it versus somebody who's actually had to confront it in themselves. And I think we have this trend actually just pivoting to why I almost didn't do this. I'm sure you see it a lot, Steve. You have kids, right?
I have kids and grandkids.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that in our pre-call. So yeah, how old are your kids?
My kids are 34, 32, and 29.
Okay, so they're active on Instagram. They're seeing probably anywhere from one to at least 5 or 10 social media pundits every day that are self-proclaimed business leaders that just get to vacation every day. Hey, you can do this. You can be like me. And I almost thought about not doing this coaching thing because I don't want to be that. That's not the example I want to set. It's not go take a vacation. Starting a business is hard work.
Yeah.
You got to dedicate time, some mental power and whatnot to getting this done. And I was very conscious that like I am not trying to be that. And going back to the point I made of people that either have studied it or faked it versus people that have actually gone through it, people recognize me, I believe, as a guy who's gone through it and has come out the other side and had to confront all of this within themselves and their own
Yeah.
businesses. So,
I think it's interesting that you said that a lot of the leaders that you coach right now, they come to you because they're looking for that framework. They're
yeah,
looking for that system that you are very qualified and you love getting systems put together. So they came to you because they want that. Give me those 5 steps that I need to do. I can plan in my day so I can fix this thing. So that's your go-to, but that quickly pivots to let's throw out the systems because this is not about systems. This is not about your role. This is not about how you show up at work. This is not how you lead your teams. This is about you. And this is about what drives you and to separate what drives them to build or continue to grow a successful organization to what's really driving them as a leader and to show up in a way that really is aligned with who they are. Back to that identity question. So I think that's interesting that they come to you for the exact thing that they think that they want, but you were able to say, well, even though this is my MO, you've even stepped into your own um, non-system way of addressing and identifying all these tensions with the leaders.
yeah. So most of the time, like I said, when they come to me, they don't 100% know what they need. They have an idea and they always think it's tactical, right? I'll go back to that. But I think that happened because I realized systems can solve operational friction, but they
Mm,
can't solve internal conflict when you don't know what you want. So
yeah.
I still love systems. I think structure matters, delegation matters, process matters. But I learned that a founder will only scale to the level that their emotional capacity allows. And I think that's heavy because I lived through that. As I said, I thought I was so important and I thought hard work meant I was exhausted. And that's what my identity allowed.
Your exhaustion was proof that you were doing it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's like what I thought, right? Like the fact that I was doing it meant that I was successful and that I was exhausted. And if doing it equals exhausted and exhausted would equal success, that was the thought. And looking back on it now, I think to myself, that is silly. Because if somebody unconsciously believes, right, that my value comes from being needed or my value comes when I'm exhausted, then no framework in the world is going to actually fully fix this issue. They
Yeah.
will override the system every time. They will jump back in every time. They will recreate dependency without even realizing it. So now when somebody comes to me wanting the 5-step blueprint, right, or the 3-step plan to fix it, I'll
Mhm.
help them operationally, but I'm also paying very close attention to the patterns underneath that. Like, what are they afraid of if they let this go? Or why does chaos for them still feel safer than stillness? And I am by no means a psychologist. I'm just looking at patterns that I've seen within myself and the hundreds of founders that I know and work with.
Yep.
But why do they keep rebuilding themselves into the center of everything when they know they shouldn't be?
Yeah.
There's something to that.
Well, I think that that's a powerful part of this because they don't want the psychologist version. They don't want that studied version. We said it earlier that they want someone who's lived it, who's gotten through it, because we don't want our Instagram therapist to tell us what to do, right? So, you talked about that pressure, that stress, that pain point, that proof point. That leads me back to something that we said in a previous conversation, which is many leaders never consciously choose the identity they now carry. So that is about I'm supposed to be busy because I'm now CEO. I'm now a leader here. So therefore, with this role comes these expectations of I have to work all the time. I have to be on call. I have to sacrifice my kid's soccer game because I have to go do this thing. So they've accepted the role, but they never chose that identity. But now it's getting smashed together. I mean, so how do we reconcile those leaders who have accepted and chose that role, but not that identity that they're carrying now?
That is an interesting question. I want to make sure I answer this correctly. So I think a lot of leaders inherit an identity accidentally. I don't think they're consciously building it, they almost absorb it, right? So they watch movies and social media of founders glorifying burnout. Look how hard I worked. I'm doing 14-hour days, right? And they get rewarded for responsiveness, and then the company grows because they're overextending themselves. And over time, exhaustion starts feeling synonymous with importance. So eventually they stop asking, is this how I want to lead? And they start assuming this is what leadership is, like these exhaustion points, which, lack of a better term, I think is bullshit. So, I,
Yeah.
and I think the reconciliation starts when someone realizes that they need to choose the responsibility, but they never intentionally define the relationship they want to have with that responsibility. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
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 And be, like, because being a CEO doesn't inherently require emotional self abandonment, right? Being ambitious doesn't inherently require disconnection from your family, your health, or yourself. You're choosing to let that happen because you're getting rewarded because, again, that reward equals exhaustion and exhaustion equals working hard and where you are rewarded for that responsiveness. So you're doing it to yourself and you just don't even know it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talk a lot on the podcast about the distillation process of whiskey. So we get to the part where we're going full blast. We are in the still. So we're doing all the things. Now we're getting some heat and some pressure. Now it's time for things to separate, things that no longer belong in the identity of the whiskey. So if we're to take that metaphor and apply it to what we've been talking about, we have a leader who has stepped into a role or who have grown into the role and they're doing all these things. They are now wanting freedom. They want that peace. They want a place for them to find themselves and to be comfortable in who they are, separating out that role and what's expected in that role. So as we have this conversation and talk about what needs to let go from that identity in order for them to move their way from success to significance, what needs to let go from these leaders that you are talking to through these unscripted conversations that you're finding yourself in?
What needs to let go?
I mean, what are they hanging on to?
Yeah.
Um, you know, because of one of the things we talked about in a previous conversation is that freedom, uh, you know, they want the freedom, but they don't actually trust who they'd be without all that chaos.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing that has to go is the belief that their worth is proportional to their sacrifice, right? I'm going to keep bringing it up because I hammer this home in the clarity calls, and I think your listeners need to know, right? Your worth is not proportional to your sacrifice. You working while your kids are at home does not that doesn't define success. A lot of leaders carry this unconscious thing in their head that says the more exhausted I am, the more valuable I must be. And eventually that becomes really destructive because they stop measuring impact and they start measuring their suffering.
Hmm.
And a lot of founders genuinely love their teams and their businesses, right? And I'm not saying that's not the case. Like it can absolutely be the case. You can absolutely love your business and your team. I love my team. My team's awesome. Love a lot of my businesses. Don't love some of my businesses, but that's neither here nor there. Different conversation for a different still of whiskey. But sometimes what they call high standards is actually fear, right? Fear that if they loosen the grip or they're not managing it tightly or micromanaging, things will fall apart. Fear that if somebody else does it differently, it means they're no longer essential. And the deepest thing that has to go is the idea that their role is the identity.
Hmm.
Businesses change, businesses evolve, roles change, right? Seasons shift. If your entire sense of self is being attached to the builder, the fixer, the guy that does everything, then you're the only person I can call to fix this, price that. Eventually, life forces a crisis when you can't operate at that pace forever. So, when you are the person that does everything, and I'll take the emotion out of this for a second because we're getting to like this identity of self and the emotional part of all this. Let's just talk numbers for a second. If you're the guy that does everything, founder led businesses with founder dependent CEOs of businesses, they sell for 3 to 5 times less than businesses that can scale without the founder.
Hmm.
Every study says so. There's not one that you're going to find that doesn't say that. If you go under the lens of a due diligence by any company looking to buy you, you know, or you're looking to buy anybody else, you don't want a founder dependent business. You want something that can scale quarter in, quarter out.
Makes sense.
Um, when you make it your identity, you're choosing to run into what I like to call, or people know as a key man risk, right? And one of two things is most likely going to happen. Either one, you're going to burn out, just inevitably, or two, you are going to get so tired and frustrated why things can't scale without you, you're just going to shut down that business and lose all that value that you've created over the years. What a waste. So you really have to fix this problem early. This is why people come to see me. And well, it's not the reason people come to see me, but it's what they end up leaving with. And I think they're very happy about that.
Yeah. So when you're talking to these leaders, um, do they have a sense that they need to maybe redefine success? What success means?
I think so. Yeah. When after that first initial call with me and we figure out they after that first call with me, it's very apparent that their whole lives as business owners, they have been um, targeting a revenue number or chasing a goal, right? And I think deep down, most of them know it that they need to change in order to redefine success. Yeah, to your question, they just haven't slowed down long enough to admit that to themselves yet, maybe. And I kind of put that in their face by holding that mirror up. I said, eventually, I think though a lot of leaders hit this strange moment where they've achieved things that they once prayed for, and they still feel restless or disconnected or emotionally exhausted. And that usually is what I think the signal is that the external success outpaced the internal definition of why they were chasing it in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a common theme for the leaders that I talk to is that, yeah, they've gotten the systems down, they've gotten their teams. I mean, even if they've gone from a founder led to, the organization that is running, the way it's supposed to, they still, are feeling that there is something more for them. And the idea of having more success or another business or whatever that metric is, they know deep down that that's not what it is. And so they don't know what that next season is supposed to look like because they know it's not feeling like the last season that they were in.
Yep, 100%. I think you just hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah. Yeah. So l- talking about you now, back to you. You have these businesses. You have a business that is helping businesses with operations and all those things, but you're being pulled more towards this coaching. Where did that come from other than finding yourself in these conversations? I mean, is that part of your own transition from what you knew as success to something that is perhaps more towards the significant side?
My my dad likes to make fun of me. Again, he was an entrepreneur as well. He likes to call me LLCJ because I got a lot of companies, and I have 8 right now. I've sold 4 in the past 3 years. I like to start companies. I get entrepreneurial ADD. I will say, since I started doing the coaching, I have not felt that. It has almost been therapeutic for me to work on others' businesses. So I get a lot of self satisfaction on in filling my personal cup
Hmm.
by doing this. That's the first thing. But if we just get to the grassroots of it, why do entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs? They can solve a problem, either better than the next guy or in a unique way or something that nobody has ever done before. They're solving a problem, though. They're filling a need. This is the same thing. I'm solving a problem. I'm filling a need. I'm seeing the problem and saying, "Hey, I can solve this. You booked time with me or you reached out to me because you know there's a problem. Let me tell you how I can fix it." So that's kind of how I gravitated here. And I think it slowed me down and made me more intentional as well doing this because I am getting my cup filled. And I think that's always a race, kind of like I said earlier. Where's the validation coming from? And for me, it's about helping other businesses and getting my hands on other businesses. I'm getting validated out of that because I can see the difference. Like, there's measurable ROI for these CEOs that are working with me, whether we're scaling from a million to 10 million or 5 to 15 or 20, or just putting time back in their days because
Hmm.
we've automated or deployed an AI agent that they never thought was possible, right? They get more time with their kids. One of my clients the other day told me that he went to his son's T-ball game for the first time this year because he
Yeah.
didn't have to be in his store. And I said,
Wow.
"Why didn't you have to be in the store?" And he goes, "Because of the SOPs and the systems we put in place. They knew how to escalate problems and not have it route back to me."
Wow.
And it was such a rewarding feeling just hearing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Did he mention how his family felt?
He didn't mention how the family felt. He mentioned, they were just he mentioned they were so happy that he was there, right? It was the first game he got to see of his son this year. His son, I think this is like second or third year playing T-ball. We have similar age kids, so we talk about that. But he hadn't gone to a game this year. And he has a brick and mortar store.
Yeah.
Um, so he would be in one of his locations, like, on Saturdays and Sundays up until this past weekend. And we've been working together for about 2 months now, so we're 60 days in. That right there, if nothing else, and he got that out of it,
Yeah.
I'm happy about that result.
Yeah. Yeah. Just being able to, reclaim the parts of his identity that was given to the business because he thought that that was success, what he was supposed to be doing. And, I don't know of a father who doesn't feel that conflict of I need to grow the business because it is supporting my family. It's allowing my family to do this and us to have this lifestyle, but it's also can come at a sacrifice for actually spending time with the family that you love. So there's always that tension. So to be able to find a way to navigate that to where he is, able to do both. I mean, that you're right. It is huge, and my guess is that he'll continue to find a way to see the other games. Um,
That is my hope now that we have the systems in place.
yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So what's your season like right now as you are, you still have the businesses, but now this coaching is filling your cup. I mean, is that becoming more of a driver for you? This part of your career?
Absolutely. I think that I feel this a way about this business than I a different way about this business than I've ever felt about a business.
Mm,
I think this season, so to speak, right, to your words, is more about alignment than achievement, though. And I go back, saying filling my cup, right? For a long time, I was addicted to momentum,
mhm.
right? Building, scaling, producing, solving, and again, entrepreneurial ADD. And I feel like I'm still ambitious, but now I care a lot more about building a life that actually feels good to live while I'm building the business than just building the business. And honestly, the coaching fills a very different part of me because it's real. These conversations matter,
Yeah.
right? I'm not talking about a supposed consumer that I might drop ship a product to in God knows where. I'm talking to the CEO on the other end of this freaking camera that has real customers and real employees, and we're making real time moves to make their lives better and their businesses better. These conversations really matter. And when a founder tells you that they showed up differently for their kid on a Sunday at a T-ball game because of something you did,
Yeah.
or finally stepped out of survival mode a little bit, that hits differently. And it hits differently than a revenue milestone. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And the teams generally feel this as well. They feel the culture shift, the leadership shift, when a leader can apply what you've been teaching them, what you've been showing them.
100%. So they start feeling, I think, more confident. Teams, I think teams always feel the emotional state of the founder, right? When the founder is feeling chaotic, that trickles down for sure. I'm sure you've had a job before, right? Where the
It,
owner or the
it
manager.
flows down. It doesn't trickle.
Yeah.
It-
That's where I guess shit flows downhill comes from, right? But when a leader becomes more grounded, right, and they become calmer and they're more trusting and they have process and they know what's coming next, everything becomes more intentional. So it really changes the culture. People take more ownership and communication improves and the business overall, right, like just becomes healthier. And not everything is now orbiting around this stress ball running around the office. A calmer leader usually leads to a calm company.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, that's great. I mean, I applaud the fact that you are leaning into what you've been feeling led to do, which is meeting these leaders in a place that you know that they need to go, or at least be exposed to, and actually finding success in terms of helping them see beyond just the business. That there is a bigger part to their story than just how they show up at work and those numbers. So
Yeah.
love that. So is there anything that you would love to depart in terms of wisdom for those people that are listening to this that are like, man, I feel this. I feel the chaos. I feel the just the pressure of doing it all. Um, I mean, what's one thing that you can leave with them that will start the thinking process, if you will?
So, one takeaway, um, I would say I'd probably tell them to pay attention to what happens when they get still, when they're at home,
Mm,
right? By themselves, because a lot of high performers will stay busy, not just because there's work to do, but because silence forces them to confront things they've been outrunning, if that makes sense. So, as an example, like, I think one of the most important questions a leader can ask him or herself, right, is if I took away the CEO hat, the title, the people needing me, the chaos floating around me, would I still know who I am? That question can feel really uncomfortable, but that's also where freedom starts because if you can answer that question and still be you, then emotionally, right, you are ready to scale and you can start building process without feeling vulnerable or having an ego about it. And
yeah.
that's going to be the unlock, man. That's going to be the unlock that lets this thing fly and the team feel empowered. So,
Yeah, for sure. That moment of stillness, if you can find them, it definitely exposes things.
yep.
It exposes where you're hiding. It
Mhm.
exposes where, it's really uncomfortable. But as you said, that's the uncomfortableness is where you need to pay attention, because that's where that misalignment is happening. That's the tension that you feel is it comes down to the word that you had used. It's misalignment.
Yep.
And when you're in line with, who you are, not just what you do, that's where um, uh, you can actually flourish without adding more hours to the day. You're actually spending those hours in the right place, just like your friend who is now enjoying T-ball for the first time. So,
100%.
yeah. Well, great. Jordan, I appreciate you coming on here and just having a conversation with these leaders, who are feeling all this stuff, all the pressure, and hopefully be able to give them a little bit of hope, knowing that, they can change without losing themselves or actually just refining themselves before things got chaotic.
Absolutely. And for any of or all of them that have questions, please feel reach out to me. I'd love to work with you. I'd love to help you. We can figure out what the unlock is for you.
Yeah, we'll put your information in the episode, so people can feel free to find you, and yeah, continue this conversation.
Yeah. Thanks so much,
So,
Steve. Appreciate you having me.
if today's conversation resonated with you, don't let it end here. Visit craftedclarity.net to explore more conversations, reflections, and resources designed to help you distill the tension between what you've built and what you're built for. You can explore The Still, a curated experience that helps you find the right conversation for the season you're in. Learn more about leadership experiences and facilitation through the work of the distiller, or connect with me directly for a one-on-one conversation. But whatever you're navigating, you don't have to distill it alone. And remember, clarity isn't found, it's crafted.